It's Bob Sands over here with Pioneer Press Deputy Sports Editor John Plume. Now, John, 54-7. The Vikings are on incredible in the first half. In the second half, what have they been outscored? 64-7, something along those lines. 64-6. It's horrible.
67-6, I think it is.
It's even worse than I thought. It is. We need to find out from somebody a statistician or someone who does these type of things, what are the odds of a team taking leads the way they have and then blowing those leads and losing games? It's got to be astronomical because you have to be able to get the lead in order to blow it. And everything changes in the second half. Jared Allen talked about maybe they should try to get the lead to let them just keep playing and never have to get off the field. But what do you think is the biggest issue? Certainly from people around the country looking at it, their reaction has to be they're getting out-coached because teams are adjusting at halftime and the Vikings aren't anticipating the adjustment. But if you're around here watching it, there's so much more to it than that.
Yeah, I don't buy into the adjustment thing. I think the Vikings have a pretty good coaching staff. I'm sure there's some people right now who are down on Frazier, and he's 1-6.
I think he showed he's a good coach.
He's 1-6 in his last 7 regular season games, but getting back to your point, I think everything goes back to if you really take a close look at those 3 games, it's all about how the offense converts on third down, and ultimately the responsibility falls to the quarterback. And Donovan McNabb is 1-8 in his last 9 regular season starts. He's shown an inability to get the ball out on time. Case in point, they have a 3rd and 2. I think it was in the third quarter on Sunday. Percy Harvin's open for about 2 seconds, and the ball comes in late. The defender wraps his arms around him, knocks the ball away, and they have to punt.
John, every ball short, high,
it's right,
late,
left,
but the problem
high,
is,
low.
If he was a pitcher, he'd be put on the DL with a dead arm syndrome.
Oh yeah, you'd be bringing in a reliever. But here's the other problem: Do you bring in a Christian Ponder? With Christian Ponder as the quarterback, do they have a 17-7, 17-0, and 20-0 lead in all 3 games? And do they hold on to those leads if he's the starting quarterback in the second half?
But ask yourself this: do they have those leads because of the play of Donovan McNabb in the first half?
He certainly has something to do with it.
Well, but so does Adrian Peterson because he's had some pretty good first half games.
Yeah,
and then he's
him to only get
shut
the ball
down in the second half of games.
For him to only get the ball 5 times, I guess if I'm Ziggy Wilf, I'm going to Les on yesterday morning and saying, why did I just give this guy $36 million in guaranteed money if you're only going to give him the ball 5 times? I mean, he has every reason to be upset. The guy had 74 yards in the first half, had runs of 29 and 14 yards called back in the second half.
Well, you should give him only $18 million guaranteed because he's only getting a half out of him.
Yeah.
Not that it's his fault.
But they can't convert third downs. The offense can't convert third downs, which leads to the defense being on the field all the time. They can't get off the field on third downs because the cross routes, the seam routes, the everything.
Well, here's the one thing on third down.
Just blows up on them.
Why, and most of the third down plays, this is not the situation, why you don't have Shanko and Kyle Rudolph on the field in third down situations, because usually it's not always 3rd and 20. It's usually something that you should be able to get with a short route. Kyle Rudolph, this kid's terrific. And Shanko's
great hands.
He does. Shanko's proven he can catch the ball. But the most alarming thing, I think, if you're a Viking fan, should be the fact that Leslie Frazier's talking about working on the mechanics of a veteran quarterback. That's scary if going into the 4th game of the season and how long he's played in the league that they have to worry about his mechanics.
But that's not surprising because if you listen to Jaworski and you watch ESPN and you see how he breaks down quarterbacks, and he does it every Monday. I think we were the first paper to report this earlier this year. Jaworski told Jeremy Fowler that McNabb has had an issue with mechanics ever since he came into the league. He said if you go to a practice, an Eagles practice, Vikings, Redskins, or whatever, this guy has to be one of the worst practice quarterbacks in the NFL. But then you see him on Sundays, and he plays great. Last year, he threw for 832 yards in the first 3 games. This year, he can't seem to find any rhythm. There's no accuracy. The things that he does well, he can't do right now. And how are you going to adjust a guy's mechanics after 13 seasons?
Well, you don't.
It's not going to happen.
But here's the question you have to ask: is it because there's something physically wrong, or is he done?
I think at some point, as a starting quarterback who's been in the league 13 years, taking the hits that this guy's taken, that your skills start to erode, and it's time for you to be a backup. But the Vikings are in a tough spot because if you throw Ponder to the Wolves and he gets beaten up behind that offensive line, and anybody who thinks that line is better than advertised, they're not.
Frankly, if you're going to do it now, if you do it later in the year, I could see going to Ponder. But
I
now,
think you wait until the bye week.
Frankly, if you're going to make a move, though, I'd go to Webb now because he's got great mobility, and he showed, certainly in the Philly game last year, that he can move a team, and he would give that team a little bit of a juice, I think, a little charge.
Yeah, I can see putting him in there, but I wouldn't agree with throwing Ponder out there because I think you're going to ruin him.
Well, it might be too early to do that, but I don't think it's too early to go with Webb because he has had some experience. Now, speaking of experience, Jerry Kill's a very experienced coach. He's been successful at other schools, but this is, I mean, if you're the Gophers, you have no idea. Their own AD said they don't know when they're getting Jerry Kill back. He's at the Mayo Clinic. He's he had a seizure on Sunday, and from what he had said, he's had a couple of dozen since the big one or the first one against New Mexico State. This is frightening for him and his family, and frankly, I mean, there's a lot of people that are pulling for him and hoping everything works out, but it's so up in the air, and this program, it's not a good time to not have your head coach around going into Michigan the start of the Big Ten season. But, I mean, it almost sounds like you should minimize the games and be concerned about him. It's just a tough time around the Gophers now.
Yeah, it's like whatever they do with the football program, nothing ever seems to go right, and it's a really sad situation for Jerry Kill and his family. And the Gophers are in a really tough spot because they just don't know. I mean, even if they get him on the right medication, he can't guarantee that he's not going to have a seizure on the sidelines in front of those players, in front of, if he coached this Saturday, 110,000 fans at Michigan. I mean, the stress level coaching this team is so much greater than it was coaching Northern Illinois. And I don't know that, Kill knew what he was getting himself into. I mean, let's face it, this program's at the bottom right now. There's been so many coaches shuffled through here in the past 40 years. I mean, the only one who really had any kind of success was Holtz, and I still think to this day if he would have stayed, they would have won a Big Ten title.
Though, I mean, Mason didn't do terrible with this team.
He didn't do terrible, but he was going to win 6 or 7 every year, and you were going to go to the Insight Bowl. And people were fed up with that. Although I think if you went back to most of the boosters right now, they'd settle for going to the Micron PC Bowl or going to the Alamo Bowl and not going to the Rose Bowl. They just want to be relevant, and right now they're not.
The problem that I think the Gophers face now, the program, is that, and I think we all agree, Jerry Kill I think he's shown himself where he's been, and that people like what he did and what he's trying to do with this program. However, down the road, if you're sending your kid to a school, are you going to hesitate to send your kid not knowing if the coach's health is what it's going to be?
Well, I mean, here's the thing.
This could really be devastating to recruiting, and you almost feel bad talking about that because you don't want to minimize the fact. This is a terrible thing he's going through. But, I mean, these are realities that down the road they're going to have to address. Of how do you convince a kid that, well, the coach is going to be fine. Don't worry about it. Your kid will play 4 years for Coach Kill.
Yeah, I don't know that opposing coaches will use Kill's condition against him.
I don't know that they have to.
If recruiting, but it's just it's a tough situation for them. And Joel Maturi's got to be on the hot seat right now because
Joel Maturi, I don't think there's any doubt his contract ends in June. It would be very surprising if a new president brought him back. That's the type of position when you have a contract expire, you want to bring in your own person to run frankly, a department that generates a great deal of money.
No, they need to move on with him. I mean, he's basically run this program into the ground. The performance of the Gophers men's hockey team over the past 2 or 3 seasons, the performance of the football program, the fact that Tubby couldn't even get the team into the NCAA tournament last year, or the NIT. I mean, Gopher sports have been in decline under Joel Maturi for the past 3 or 4 years. He is the guy who's accountable for what's happening. He's the guy who has to be accountable for some of the hires he's made. I mean, for him to come out and say they're going to renegotiate Don Lucia's contract, are you kidding me? The guy hasn't been he can't even get them into the Division I hockey tournament. Can't even get him into the Sweet 16. I mean, it's just the decisions that are being made by him are so questionable, and this thing with Jerry Kill just compounds the whole thing because it forces you to ask the question, how close did they take a look at his health? And you just don't know right now.
Well, it would appear that they asked the question, they knew what he'd been through, and they just decided to move on. But I guess time will tell in many ways, and the time is time for us to wrap it up.